welcome back to Afternoon Live. Our next guest shared a 40-year friendship with one of heavy metal's biggest stars, Ozzy Osbourne. His new book shares their bond, the wild stories, and the life lessons he learned along the way. We welcome the author of Ozzy and Me, writer Stephen Ray. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that people who love Ozzy and his music have this book right now, because you always planned on publishing this season, right? But you weren't sure if you should move forward.
That's exactly right. The publishing world works so far in advance. This book was scheduled a year in advance to come out this November. And of course, with what happened in July, I did have a thought that I didn't want to be seen as cashing in. I didn't want to be seen as sort of jumping on a bandwagon or anything. And you're quite right. I started writing this book almost 6 years ago. It's only 2 months short of 6 years. And of course, who knew what was going to happen? And the saddest thing for me personally is that Ozzy never got to read the book.
But you got the blessing of Jack, right? He was the one that said, no, you've got to do it. Dad would want you to move forward with this project.
That's right. Jack and I spoke just a couple of days after the funeral, actually. And Jack came to me. I didn't ask him. I didn't speak to him. He came. He said, "Listen, I'd like to write the foreword for your book for you." And I drove him to the airport. I was at the Osbournes' home, and I drove him to the airport to fly back. He lives in LA, and he wrote the foreword to this book on the flight back to LA just a few days after his dad's funeral, which again tells you so much about the family.
Yeah, and how beautiful to have his blessing like that on the very front page as readers open the book. So let's go back to the beginning for you. You grew up in Northern Ireland in a really tumultuous time. So Ozzy's music meant a lot to you as a kid.
Absolutely. They say that your environment influences you. And not in Belfast, Northern Ireland was a terrible place in the 70s and 80s. We were killing each other all the time on a daily basis. And that sort of environment, that hard rock music, all those sort of classic rock bands, your Deep Purples and your AC/DCs and Black Sabbath and all that sort of stuff, that was like the soundtrack to our youth. But especially Ozzy. As soon as I heard Ozzy's voice, he had such an identifiable voice. You always knew it was Ozzy. And when that was combined with just some of the greatest rock songs ever, I mean, he has stone cold classics that still stand up 40, 50, 60 years later almost.
Yeah, that voice is so captivating. So we can see in the book a letter that your mother wrote to the Ozzy Osbourne fan club. Is that kind of the beginning of the story for you?
Yeah, it was. It was 1985. Ozzy announced he was playing a show called Rock in Rio in Brazil. It was the greatest rock festival the world had ever seen, a 10-day event with all sorts of bands. And my dad said to me, maybe we should go. You're a huge Ozzy fan. He's a big music fan. Everyone's playing there. And so my mom wrote a letter to the fan club, of course, years before the internet, years before emails and that kind of stuff. And she wrote to the fan club and said, my son's hoping to go to Rio. We're going to take him, but we have no clue. How do you get tickets, where the event is? You can imagine being in Belfast and trying to work out how to get to South America in 1985 for a rock show. It wasn't the easiest thing. And Ozzy's secretary called my mom. She received the letter. She called my mom and said, if you guys make it to Brazil, just get yourselves there. We'll take care of everything once you get there. And they gave me a backstage pass. They took me onto the side of the stage to watch Ozzy's two shows there. They took me back and forth to the venue on Ozzy's bus. And then on our last day there, Ozzy invited me and my parents to breakfast with him, just the four of us. No assistants, security, handlers, anything at all. So that was really the start of everything, yeah.
Yeah, that generosity and openness to a stranger is pretty remarkable. And then that kind of changes the course of your life, right? Because then you're a teenager and you're on tour with them.
That's right. About a year later, I had saved up my money and I was going to get buses, follow like the tour he was doing around Ireland and the UK. And I'd saved up for a year and I was going to jump on buses and stay in youth hostels. And the same thing happened. They said, no, we'll take you on our tour bus. And they paid for all my hotels and they gave me an unlimited all access pass. So it really did. That was 1986. And it really did change the trajectory of my life, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you travel the world, you see so many things. So at a certain point, Ozzy gifts you these two blank notebooks, right? And that becomes really the beginning of this book that we have today.
That's right. And I was always, when I was working on tour with him in the 90s, and again, it was sort of before Instagram and surfing the web and everything. So we would, chat, or we would do crosswords or talk to each other, whatever it was backstage and on the tour bus. And I was always writing. I was always interested in writing. And so I would just be sitting, scribbling in a diary or a journal. And Ozzy would see me doing this all day. So one day he went out and he bought me these two fantastically lavish leather-bound notebooks, and was basically like, well, if you want to write here, here's something to write in, and just keep a record, just write what you want, basically. And so I did that. That formed the first draft of this book, the notes and the stories and the diary detailing what we had done from almost 30 years ago and almost.
It's pretty incredible to have the detail that you do have. So it's how amazing that you had the foresight to write all those things down. I want to ask you about a particular party at the height of the Osbournes, right? Ozzy and Sharon renew their vows. That sounds like the best invitation you could probably ever get.
Oh, absolutely. It was the most fantastically wonderful, over the top. Sharon, as Ozzy often said, Sharon loves to spend money and she loves to throw a party. And you put those two things together. This was the Beverly Hills Hotel. It was everything you could possibly imagine from a party. All sorts of entertainment, all sorts of things going on, all sorts of foods, all sorts of giveaways, that even the sort of multimillionaires of this party were rugby wrestling each other to try and get their hands on this limited edition stuff. So absolutely, I feel very privileged that I got an invite to that.
Well, their relationship is so special. I mean, it's so impressive they stayed together for so long. And you say that Sharon kind of takes care of the grown-up stuff so Ozzy can just be Ozzy. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, Sharon is that, Ozzy said himself many times, not only did she save his career, she saved his life. When Ozzy got fired from his band that made him famous, Black Sabbath, he was sort of a washed up drunk, as he would say. And Sharon was the one that came in and shook him out of a stupor. I mean, he was drinking himself to death, and she was the one that not only put him on track for his career, which he became so much more successful as a solo artist than he ever was with Black Sabbath, and would play out, sell out stadiums and arenas and all sorts of stuff across the world. But she also got him fit and healthy again whenever he was, in a bad way.
Yeah, makes a huge difference. So you were able to attend that final show that Ozzy performed at. Can you even put that experience into words?
It was one of the greatest weeks of my life, and it is. You mentioned earlier about the book, and they did sort of hold the publication. Sorry, excuse me, when going to press a little bit, so I could sneak in a chapter, because it was just such a fantastic
Yeah.
experience. It was the rock world came to pay homage to him, from all the biggest bands, Metallica and Guns N' Roses, and all the biggest bands in the world, who all played for free. It was a charity gig. They didn't receive a penny for playing that gig, and it was just such. It was like the greatest high school reunion ever. Everybody who'd ever worked with Ozzy, everybody who'd been in his band, everybody who knew him, we were all together, and it was such a fantastic send off. And when the news came through, of course, of what had happened to him, at least that was something to cling on to, that he got to see how much he meant to the world.
Absolutely. And you got to share a really special private moment with him after that final show. And you've got this photo. I mean, that must mean so much.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was so, so grateful. I got a message that he wanted to see me before I left, as I was sort of packing up the day after the show. And thankfully, someone who works for Ozzy was in his suite at the same time, and she took that photograph of us together. And I was so grateful to have that sort of moment with him after the show. And I'm so grateful that she took that photograph, so that I've always got it. And that was 40 years and 6 months after my first photograph with him.
Yeah, and how great that you were able to sneak in that last chapter in the book so you can share that with all of us. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. It was so great chatting with you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, the book again is Ozzy and Me by Stephen Ray. We'll have more information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Live right after this.